Hello, girls, guys, or otherwise. This is Rich, and today we're going through Chapter 2 of The Inner Temple of Witchcraft by Christopher Penzak. And this is Digging the Roots, or Digging for the Roots, excuse me. I have a jelly over here that is vying for my attention. So if you see me petting her, let's go ahead and give her a good girl treat. Hold on. She is really, really wanting a treat right now. Here you go. And yeah, it's about an hour before the time for feeding, so yeah, she's getting a little hungry. Anyway, grab yourself some tea, coffee, or cappuccino, what have you, and let's go on and get into this. Today I am drinking, this is Twinings Earl Grey with lavender, and it is really, really good. I like it with sugar. I like all my tea with sugar, but anyway. Let's have a little bit of that. Okay. So, this, um, you stay down now. You had your treat. Okay. So, this chapter, because it is history and because I am not so well versed in the history of witchcraft, and, there's a lot that we don't know, and there's a lot that is written by the victor. And there's a lot of speculation between one thing or another. So I don't have as many notes on on this chapter as I did on the other one. Okay, you have to sit on your spot. No, you can't eat my finger. I am sorry, but yeah, she is really trying my nerves right now. She is a good girl. She's a fantastic familiar. She just needs to let me record this. Anyway, so we start off on page 17. This is I think this goes up to page 40. So what, 23 pages, if I'm doing the math correctly? Anyway, one of you mathematicians out there that knows how to subtract really well will tell me. I think it's like 23 pages. Anyway, there's a couple pages that have figures and whatnot. So I think all in all, I think it's actually only like 21 pages of actual content, written content. One of the pages is just a timeline, or two of the pages are just timeline. One's a figure. So the notes that I do have are just little underlines, agreeing, disagreeing, and expanding upon stuff. I have a feeling that whenever it gets into other chapters, I'm going to have a lot more notes. So anyway, we start off with Christopher writing, "History is written by the victors," and I have here, "so true and sad." Um, Whenever cultures clash, the dominant force is the one left to record the events of the past for the future generations. Those defeated leave behind physical artifacts and even folk tales and myth, but their way of life is lost in the march of time. Excuse me. And then he goes on, and then at the end of this thought here, he has, although actual events are objective, a viewpoint of those events is subjective, depending on your previous beliefs. And like I said, I have a note here that says, "so true and sad." I really wish that in the greater sense of history that we could have an equal type of documentation of what people were going through on either side of any type of event. And he writes in here in the middle of this paragraph, of the opening paragraph, and I think it's a fantastic analogy. If you read about the American Revolution written by an American, the text would be biased in favor of the American heroes, with the British as the villains. If you read about the same events from a British author the objective fact states locations would be the same, but the tone would be very different. And I think this is a wonderful analogy, and it also draws up a question, because I have not heard of a British person describing the American Revolution. I'd really like to know from my English viewers out there, my British viewers out there, what do you guys learn about the American Revolution? I mean, we're a bunch of treasonous people, yes, and I do agree with that, but we hold that as a point of pride for ourselves. So I kind of really want to know, like, what are you guys taught in England about the American Revolution? I know that whenever you're talking just the Civil War, and Mama Squirrel has touched on this, that whenever they lived down south, that it was referred to as the War of Northern Aggression, not as the Civil War. Um, so, yeah, I'd like to see the difference from the British side. If any of you can uh, give me any insight to that, it would be much appreciated. Um, he goes on here at the very bottom of the page. As historians, anthropologists, scholars, teachers, and students, we can reclaim and reconstruct, but we can never really know the truth. And I think this is an absolute terrible, terrible truth. Um, that there are just some things that we will never know. Um, and it's hard for me, as somebody that does love history, especially more modern history, to get past that there's things that we never know, especially whenever we have nowadays we have so much that's recorded uh about like the last 100 years, last 200 years, where my interests more lie. um Whenever it comes to history, we have um more information out there. Let me just adjust my chair here, hold on, there we go. Okay, I gotta lean back a little. So in the last 100, 200 years, we have a lot more information out there on what either side went through, what the common person went through, stuff like that. But the further and further we go back, we don't really have that type of documentation out there. And I think that's a terrible truth, especially whenever you're talking about a history of a religion or of a spiritual practice that is out there and is becoming more and more popular as of today. The next paragraph, and I'm not, again, I'm not going to go through every single paragraph, but these three paragraphs on page 18, I just kind of wanted to touch on. But the next one is: the facts of witchcraft and ancient spiritual traditions are shrouded in mystery and misunderstandings because they were almost completely vanquished by the conquering forces of Europe. Everyone telling the story has a bias. Traditional researchers do not want to challenge what they know to be fact and dismiss any theories to the contrary. Those excited by the prospect of ancient religions can let their modern enthusiasm cloud their less biased analytical views. People involved in modern pagan religions have a strong bias as well. Practitioners and teachers, like myself, have a vested interest in showing the beneficial aspects of witchcraft throughout history, while discrediting the misconceptions surrounding it. And I have written here, the bias is deep and causes resentment noticed in the Christo-Pagan practice. Um, there is so much animosity in the formerly Christian individuals. And I kind of wanted to point this out specifically for the Christo-Pagans out there, that this is something that we come up to a lot. And I'm just going to try to move my mic over there so I can better see this book. Um, a lot of the individuals out there practicing witchcraft and paganism, they have, uh, there are so many of them, and I understand why they have an animosity towards Christianity or anybody that has any links to Christianity. And as Christo-Pagans, we kind of, this is the place that we sit. We sit in uh, in the melding of two religions, in paganism and in Christianity, and we see and we just soak in the similarities of both, and we love it. And it's a very rich part of our practice. And because of the Christian aspect of it, there are many pagans out there that will say, no, you can't be Christian and pagan. This isn't a thing, and in fact, it has been a thing for, you know, thousand, 2,000 years. It's totally a thing historically, and within our own practices, we're doing it. So, there's a bias that comes in where the witches are the ones persecuted, and rightfully so. However, there's a hatred that is formed for Christians or anybody having a Christian label to their practice. And it's caused a lot of people to be turned off by Christo-Paganism and really not accept us in the community. I will say there are so many that accept us, and I am absolutely loving and feel blessed that we are accepted by these individuals. But there are still so many out there that will sit there saying, no, that's not a thing, and have this narrow-minded view towards my practice because of it. And they won't have it for any other practice out there. So it's kind of a slap in the face. Like, you accept others, but you won't accept me. And I really wish people could get past that and understand that just because we're Christo-Pagans doesn't mean that we put our stamp of approval on the burning times. Not at all. In fact, we would have been ones to be burned as well by their standards because we were considered heretics. Anyway, moving on to the next paragraph. For many years, I wanted to know exactly what happened. I wanted information on the ancient rituals and practices. I needed to know exactly where my witch roots came from and how my spiritual ancestors practiced, and I was disappointed. There is no definitive history accepted by everyone. No one could tell me the ancient rituals and stories unchanged. So I have a note here. No one will ever know what the previous practitioners practiced, and this is something that I have struggled with as well. Whenever I started my practice, I wanted to know, like, what's the right way to do things. I am a very by the book, this is how it is, black and white type of person. Uh, Especially being somebody in the military that kind of loves rules and regulations. This is something that I needed to know. Like, if I'm walking a circle, which way do I go? What's the correct way? And the simple answer to that is whatever way you need to for that ritual. If it's a vanishing ritual, go anti-sunwise, from the east to uh, east to the north to the west to the south. Trying to do this backwards. Um, and if it's something that you're building, from east to south to west to north. Now, there is a difference because some people start in the north. And then what happens if you are in the southern hemisphere and, maybe your practice, goes the opposite direction, because of one reason or another. Um, there's no right or wrong answer to anything in the practice of witchcraft, depending on what tradition. I do want to caveat that. And I I had a really hard time whenever I first started my practice, knowing that, hey, it's okay to not do something the same exact way. And in my mind, it wasn't. In my mind, you had to do it this way. This is how it had to be. And yeah, no, nope. So now in my practice, I am developing my own ritual system, my own way of doing things that all have their own meanings, that all have their own connections, and after a certain point, I kind of have to do away with worrying about what the previous practitioners practiced, because in their time, in their day and age, it may have worked, and it may have worked for them. And things may have changed since then, and it's okay for me to adapt and uh, cultivate my own way of practice that fits me as an individual and as a current day practitioner. Okay, going on to the next paragraph. I now welcome a multitude of well thought out, researched views, but I am no longer attached to the idea of any one history is more correct than any other. The literal facts of our history may never be known beyond a shadow of a doubt, and they do not need to be. Love this. Our history has changed so much in the last 100 years, but stop it, Jelly. But such new revelations do not change how I practice witchcraft today. My practice changes as I grow and evolve. I am open to personal relations, or I'm sorry, I am open to personal revelations as well as historical information. My foundation is based on those who have come before me, and that foundation is as solid as I need it to be. And I have my note here. This leads to a more personal form of practice. And that's what I'm saying, though, is that, you know, getting past that initial um, apprehension of, am I doing this right? To the who cares how they practice, this is how I'm practicing. It leads to more personal, a more, um, I don't know how else to say it, but a more personal practice, a more tailored practice for yourself. And I kind of really love that he points this out. It's the second paragraph, and I'm loving this, because if I had read this, in that first couple years, now I probably still would have been like, yeah, but this is how it's supposed to be. But knowing this, and I've read it from other authors, and I've heard it from other practitioners, but hearing this here said like this, and knowing what I know now, probably still wouldn't have changed because that's who I am. Um, but it would have maybe helped me come to terms with that quicker or easier. Now, moving on to page 19, about halfway down the page, he writes here, Stone Age people were polytheists, believing in more than one god. Other spirits possibly animated the sky, storms, mountains, rivers, and fire. And I have here as my note, most probably, but not a concrete stance. Could have believed in spirits, but not actual deities. And here I know I'm splitting hairs, but I have such an issue with, in a historical sense, saying that uh, people were like a definitive, this is what they did, when we don't necessarily know exactly how they believed, because they didn't write about how they believed or what they believed, what their traditions were. And I just wanted to note that it's probably true, most likely true, um, but I have an issue with making um, a declaration such as that and putting that on the past whenever we don't necessarily know for sure. And I just like to have in probably in there rather than a definitive this is, or maybe have something like the majority of scholars believe that this is what the past was like. And even though we will never know, unless we come across some ancient writing in a cave somewhere, we may never know unless that happens. Most likely it's true, but not necessarily a definitive thing. Moving on to page 20 here, at the in the second paragraph, towards the end of the paragraph, middle and end, in the earliest creation myths, the mother was often the prime source of creation, self fertilizing, single handedly manifesting reality from the void. And I just kind of love this. Um, I love um creation myths. They don't necessarily hold a lot of water for me as a definitive, this is what happened, but I kind of love them. And I I'm actually going to be talking about creation myths tomorrow, so join me then for that one. But I kind of love how he wrote this, and it's something that I wish I had read earlier on in my practice, and that's okay. That I'm learning this later on, whenever I already know this stuff, um, from reading other things and listening to other people and whatnot. But I wish I had read this earlier on in my practice. Actually picked up this book and sat down and read through it and whatnot. Um, Next chapter, like most of these books, I will be honest, I've gone through, and most of those books up there, I have gone through and done like a skimming of the book. I have not really read books all the way through from cover to cover. It's just really hard for me to carve out the time to be able to do that, to sit down and read a book. And that's kind of what this book club is me sitting down and making sure that I'm reading these texts, treating them as sacred, but also, you know, giving them a little bit of criticism behind the scenes here. Anyway, moving on. Okay, we have The Changing Age, a little subtitle here, and I really like how this speaks to me as a Christo-Pagan. It reads, Goddess-oriented scholars suspect that this culture dominated until the rise of the patriarchal religions near the time of Abraham, the first prophet of Yahweh. From that point on, the pendulum swung in the opposite direction, and the goddess cultures in Europe, Africa, and the Middle East slowly lost their foothold in our world, to the point that we now doubt their existence at all, since they seem so different from our normal conceptions of religion and reality. Now we sit on the cusp of a new shift with the potential to strike a balance between the two and synthesize the best of each, achieving a state of harmony. And the reason this speaks to me, as a Christo-Pagan, is because in my practice, this last sentence really, and I'm going to read it again, is really what Christo-Paganism is for me. It's us, um, as he says, we now sit on the cusp of a new shift with the potential to strike a balance between the two and synthesize the best of each, achieving a state of harmony. Um, for me, that is a a verse that is so true and so meaningful to me as a Christo-Pagan, and I would assume other Christo-Pagans out there that are watching this, that this really speaks to who we are and what we are attempting, even by making videos or by advertising who we are and what we're about. Not even necessarily advertising, but um, being out there as Christo-Pagans rather than hiding ourselves away because certain pagans in places don't accept us, or certain Christians out there don't accept us. Jelly, you were just wanting to, like, be all over Daddy today. Yeah. But anyway, that really spoke to me as a Christo-Pagan. I think that is a strong statement and a very poignant statement at that. So, excuse me while I have a little tea. No, you can't. Like, you know what? You need to lay down. You need to lay down. Come on. Okay. You want to be on camera? There she is. There she is. Okay. Yeah. You see some junk over there. Yeah. I'm about to clean that stuff up because I have prayers that I'm doing tonight. So, yeah. This all has to get cleaned up. We got a night ahead of us. It's 5 o'clock, and I usually go to bed around 10. And I have to work tomorrow, so yeah. Anyway, moving on. I'm on page 23 under the subtitle of Pagan Europe. This is the second paragraph, and it reads, "The ancient Celts were very complex and culturally different from the civilized cultures of the time. Scholars believe they came from common Indo-European roots with the Hindu culture. One band moved west across Europe, and another moved east to populate India. Common points of language, myth, and art support this theory. Look at the Celtic knotwork, and Indian art with geometric patterns. The Celtic version is softer and rounded, but they are similar. Celtic stories of the dark goddess figure, the Cailleach, survive today. I think that's how you pronounce that. My apologies if it's not. Striking a similar phonic and magical resonance with the dark Hindu goddess Kali. And I have here these similarities. If I can speak, that'd be great. Thank you. These similarities can be accepted by pagans, but similarities between Christianity and paganism isn't. My bias is showing. Yes, I do have a bias on this, and it's something that I do harp on, that certain things are accepted by the majority of pagans and whatnot, but my faith isn't, and it's just a real point of contention for me, so I'm sorry to keep bringing it up, but I kind of did while I was reading this, and I'm going to share that with you guys. Moving on to page 25, at the bottom of the page, under the subtitle of The Rise of Christianity, he writes, "The teachings of certain sects within this church." Let me start over with that. "The teachings of certain sects within this early church, particularly those of Gnostic Christianity, were quite mystical and personal traditions." Thank you. We don't have many authors out there that are willing to say this, and I very much appreciated Christopher Penzak saying this. He goes on to state, "Reincarnation, healing, and trance work were part of the religion. Later, the teachings other than Gnostic were codified into one church with strict dogma and much less personal mysticism. Correct. As I know it, that is correct about Gnostic Christianity as I start to study it more and more and really absolutely loving it. Um, and this would be more in line with my personal beliefs um, of a personal mysticism with an unknown higher figure, um, a, a loving Christ figure, a loving Sophia, um, that they make themselves known to us and whatnot. And I will be doing videos of that in the future as I go more and more in depth with my studies. He goes on to say in the next paragraph, and then we're going to be skipping around here for a little bit. A small number of modern witches feel Jesus was fundamentally a witch in action, if not in name. Thank you. Traveling with 12 apostles plus himself, creating the traditional number of a coven of 13. Yep. And doing acts of magic. He is also seen as the expression of the sacrificed god archetype, found many places in the world, such as the Egyptian god Osiris, the Greek Dionysus, and the Celtic sacrificed king. In Christian mythology, Jesus Christ resurrected himself after death um, and was associated with vegetation, most notably grapes and wine, like Dionysus. Ironically, the early Christians were persecuted by the Western Roman Empire, giving us the popular image of the Christians being thrown to the lions. The Romans thought they were cannibals, eating the flesh and drinking blood, with the transubstantiation of the host of the Eucharist there. Yes. Okay. Yes. Oh, we're gonna be done here in a little bit, baby. Okay. And now I'm gonna skip around a little bit. He says in the third chapter on that, or the third paragraph on that page, he has just a little excerpt. He says, Satan, the tester of faith, which the actual verbiage or the actual word that Satan comes from is, excuse me, is the word Hasatan, which literally means like the roadblocker, I believe. It's really, he is a trickster type in that many other religions have. Like, think of Loki. Um, he is basically Christianity's Loki. He is a figure that is a tester of faith, and a blocker of goals. So basically, that's what he is. And instead, Christianity has actually made him like this arch villain and whatnot, when really him doing his job is to make people think, hey, is this what I'm supposed to do? So, yeah. Anyway, Satan, the tester of faith. I do like that he put that in there. Um, on the near the top of page 27, such labels have smack of inherent racism, assuming black to be bad and white to be good. Here we're talking about types of magic: black magic, white magic. Yes, and I believe there's been so much talk, at least in the last year, about white magic, black magic, and the inherent racism in saying white or black magic, uh, with black being seen as bad and white being seen as good. Yeah, definitely have issues with that. Um, I use more the wording um, of what I use the wording more of healing magic or helping magic rather than white magic, as more people would normally have said it. And rather than using black magic, I use maybe baneful magic. It's more of a definite, this is what this is for. It's baneful. It's not black or white. It just is. But my intention behind it would be more painful than helping or healing. So yes, I do like that he has that in there. At the very bottom, he has Christians looking for an excuse to condemn witchcraft will quote the Bible, "Suffer not a witch to live," from Exodus 22:17. The passage has been translated many times. In older versions of Exodus, the meaning was, "Thou shalt not suffer a sorceress to live." In this particular setting, the sorceress referred to a poisoner, murderer, a poisoner, or comma a murderer. Okay, and then he goes on. The original meaning was "suffer not a murderer to live," which eventually got confused with the word witch, causing misunderstandings to this day. Ancient Hebrews did not outlaw the practice of magic. In fact, rabbis were practitioners in the tradition of King Solomon, keeping knowledge of the Kabbalah, their mystical teachings. Yeah, I'm starting to get tongue-tied here. Their mystical teachings. I think most people would agree that being a witch does not mean one is a murderer. Unfortunately, many old inquisitors had no problem assuming that the two go hand in hand. And that's one thing that I do want to point out, and I'm going to have a drink of tea here, is that, you know, Jewish tradition did have a mystical tradition. Judaism does have it still today, a mystical tradition of the Kabbalah. And there's not really a stigma there as much as there is for Christians who practice witchcraft. Um, at least not within the pagan community that I have seen. And more people are okay with it, and that's fantastic. But people don't really go the length to see that the part that people are referring to whenever they say "suffer not a witch to live" is not what it was originally intended to mean. And if it's okay for a Kabbalist to be practicing, then why not a Christo-Pagan? And I think this goes back to the beginning of the chapter where we have those biases that we carry along from our previous life, a previous religious upbringing that is and should no longer be considered a way of feeling or a way of life for us. Um, you've changed your religion and whatnot, and or the faith that you practice. Um, so don't have the animosity there just because the people are crap. Okay. Going to page 30 here, we have in the second paragraph, could be considered still the first paragraph, but anyway, we go on to say none of the material was based on actual pagan practices. This is talking in reference to the witch's hammer, the Malus Maleficarum. None of the material was based on actual pagan practices, but on Christian doctrine. The flights of the author's imagination and misogyny, although there is some speculation that the material was used by others as a manual to practice witchcraft, including the Black Mask, a mockery of corruption of the Catholic Mass. There are roots, excuse me, there are roots of Satanism, not witchcraft. Contemporary witches see this form of satanic witchcraft as having nothing to do with the true spiritual roots of the craft. Yes, absolutely. Um, Whenever you are looking at the Malus Maleficarum and the Black Mass that is supposed to have been done, um, yeah, no, it's not really a thing. I don't think anybody really does a mass backwards in order to give a big FU to the church. That's just not a thing. No. no. But this is still something that you will hear from evangelicals out there saying that, they did a black mass. No, no, they didn't. They had a ritual aligning with their own faith, has nothing to do with your faith, and yeah, know what you're talking about, please. Um, so I kind of love and hate watching some evangelicals out there because they're like, I was a witch and we did this black mass. No, you didn't. No, you didn't. You really didn't. Okay. I'm gonna get off of that because next thing I'm gonna be doing is, yeah, going off on some people, and I do have. Mm, no, it was a pagan perspective one that we did, and the lady is weird as hell, and oh, yeah, it's like exposing Christianity or something like that, or exposing witchcraft. I think was what the the series was called, and I can't remember her name off the top of my head. Um, but yeah, we did a week on that, and everybody's like, "Why is she yelling at me?" Which I got past very quickly. I'm just gonna take a little side tangent. I got past that very quickly because I have watched many evangelicals um, preach and talk and whatnot. So I know how they are, and I know whenever they start shouting and everything, that's them trying to get their point across. I understood that. No, what I went for was a point by point. This is what you got wrong. You're dumb. This is wrong. So, yeah, I absolutely love that. It was while I was in Korea, so um, look back in year like 2015, 2016, somewhere around there, is whenever we did those. And if I can find it, I might not be able to find it before this actually has to go live. But if I can go back and find it, I will try to put a link in the description below. It was actually kind of a fun video to do because it's like 5 videos and listening to her for like an hour and a half sermon or whatnot, and it was like me like writing down all that. Anyway, we're gonna go to the bottom of the page of uh, page 30, and it says homosexuals were persecuted along with witches. The derogatory term, and I'm going to say this, flaming faggot, which refers to a gay person, originated in the burning times, citing execution through fire. The word faggot originally referred to kindling. Um, from everything that I've heard, this is true, and this is why I stop people in their tracks whenever they use that word. I hate that word, and it bugs me that I actually said it. But I'm only saying it because it is quoted in here, because it is a point that I wanted to make for this, is that if you have called somebody this in the past, that is like saying to a black person the N word. No, no, don't be doing that shit. Moving on. Uh, we're going to go to the bottom of page 31, last paragraph here. In Salem, Massachusetts, now a neo-pagan mecca, a hysteria of witchcraft led by accusations of a few teenage girls fascinated with the occult led to the death of 36 people and the imprisonment of over 150 men and women in the Puritan community in 1692 into 1693. One of my so many great uncles was one of these people that was imprisoned. He ended up escaping, and um, and he wasn't prosecuted and found guilty of witchcraft. By the time he came back, it had already blown over and whatnot. So, but yeah, he did escape, and he did end up living. His name was John Alden Jr. And actually, a lot of people out there like know of him. There was actually a movie done about him and whatnot. So, and I haven't seen the movie yet, but a lot of fun history for my family, at least in there. Even though not a direct relative, so many great uncle. Really cool. Uh, and I'm going to skip around here. On page 32 and 33, we have a timeline along with yeah, with a tree timeline and with um, an actual chronology. Is that the word that I'm looking for? Chronological timeline. Thank you, Jelly. And I don't think I have another note. Oh wait, yes I do. On page 40, next to the last paragraph, the traditions and movements have branched out many times, forming a complex web including almost as many traditions as practitioners, creating an eclectic mix. Witchcraft is very personal, and you can no longer really say there is a right way and a wrong way to practice it. So I really wanted to leave with that. I think that's important to note that there is no right or wrong way to practice witchcraft. As I bump the desk here, Jelly, you sit down on your kitty condo, okay? Thank you. I'm almost done. Jeez. Anyway, um, I have a little note here at the very end of the chapter. My views on the fact or fiction of the history of witchcraft are complicated. Since there is so much guesswork, I am apprehensive to calling anything as fact. Many of the points in this chapter I do believe are true. However, I like to keep it at arm's length and focus on the present day, on the here and now. Um, So that's really, and I wanted to put that in there so I didn't forget to mention that. I do believe a lot of what is said here in the second chapter, and I think once we start to go, probably in I believe it's the fourth chapter. Yeah, the fourth or fifth chapter, we're going to start getting into more of the practitioner part of this series, rather than going through the history lesson of witchcraft. Maybe I should actually do videos on the history of witchcraft, um, or at least certain traditions and whatnot. Maybe I'll do that in the far future. That's going to take a lot of research, so nothing that's going to happen immediately now. Um, but whenever it comes to history of witchcraft, because there is so much that is guesswork, um, so much of the probably happened and most likely occurred, and scholars believe, um, since we don't have actual answers to them, I try to keep those at arm's length because I don't want to um, get caught in those trappings of, well, this is the truth, and then we have a historical study or a historical research that is done with anthropology or whatnot. Something's dug up and they find out, hey, everything that we all thought was true is completely false. Um, I don't want to catch myself in those trappings. Um, Not because of YouTube or anything. I just don't want to catch myself because of my own stability of mind. Um, whoops. I don't want to catch myself in that stance of, well, if I thought this was true before and now it's turning out to be false, what else is false? And then I get into my own doubt spiral. So that's one reason I don't really focus on the history of witchcraft, um, because of those mental trappings and the doubt that it causes. Uh, I've had that with Christianity. I don't want that with witchcraft as well. So it's taken me a long time to get to the point in my life and in my practice where um, I'm able to sit back and say, okay, the Bible, which um, I've read in the past, is more of a mythos than it is, and more of a guidebook than actual rules. Where I grew up, you know, hearing and knowing that these are rules that were given down by God, and these are things that we have to obey by, and whatnot. When really, no, this is just stuff that I was being told. And I took those as truth. And whenever my practice developed more and more, and I started questioning things more and more, it really kind of messed with my head about the doubts and whatnot that I had. So whenever it comes to history of witchcraft, I just don't want that doubt in there. So anyway, in the next chapter, in chapter 3, we're going to be doing that next week. It looks like we are talking about flavors of witchcraft, which is the title. So different types of practices. Actually seems like a fairly short chapter. What starts on page 41 to 57? So what, 16 pages? Nice. Not a hard read. It doesn't look like it. So yeah, and gives us a basic overview um, of different practices out there. So I'm kind of looking forward to that. I always love studying different religions and different practices. So looking forward to chapter number 3. Um, Again, that will be next Saturday right here, same bat time, same bat channel. So join me next week for chapter 3 of The Inner Temple of Witchcraft by Christopher Penzak. And until then, I will see you guys tomorrow whenever I'm discussing creation myths and creation mythos and whatnot. So in the meantime, go ahead and tell me below, before we go here, what are your thoughts on the history of witchcraft? Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Do you agree with Christopher Penzak? Do you disagree with him? Um, what do you think about what we don't know? And do you think there's going to be discoveries in the future? Go ahead and leave those answers and your suggestions and whatnot in the comment section below. And while you're down there, go ahead and hit the subscribe button and click the little bell notification, because I'm going to be having some stuff that comes up soon that is for for subscribers only. So do be sure that you do that. And until next time, may you have love, hugs, and ladybugs. Bye bye.